I know that my story isn't nearly as scary as the other stories on here, but it is one of the scariest things that have ever happened to me, so I thought I'd post it here. I'm a female, and I was 14 at the time. I'm from a big city in Germany, and that afternoon I wanted to buy a birthday present for a friend. I planned on taking the subway downtown where all the shops were. Even though my home city is big, it's considered very safe, so I never felt unsafe going to friends' houses or downtown by myself. While I was waiting on the platform, a guy slowly walked past me and stopped just a few meters away from me. I remember that he must have been in his late teens or early 20s and that he had glasses on. While I looked around the platform, bored, since the subway wouldn't arrive for another 3 minutes, I noticed that the guy was directly looking at me. Being a rather shy girl back then, I quickly looked away. After a few seconds, I wanted to check if he was still looking, and I took a quick glance. Surely enough, this guy was still staring. This went on until the subway arrived. By then, I was feeling really uncomfortable. Luckily, there were a few other people on the platform, so I still felt kind of safe. I got on and succeeded in snatching one of the few empty seats left, since it was close to Christmas and the subway was packed with people. I couldn't see the guy from my seat, so I calmed down a little. A couple of minutes later, I got off at my stop and took the escalator up to the street. While standing on the escalator, I turned around and my heart sank. The creepy guy on the platform was standing a few meters behind me on the same escalator, and he was still staring at me. I tried to calm myself by thinking that the station was a popular meeting spot, and that a lot of people who wanted to go shopping often got off here. Since it was close to Christmas, he was probably just some random shopper. When I arrived on the street, I turned right, walked down the street, and turned right again at the next corner. When I turned the corner, I quickly looked down the street I was coming from, and the guy was walking my direction. I felt really uncomfortable, so I entered a bookshop and waited behind a bookshelf for the guy to walk to wherever he was heading to. After a few minutes, I got out of the shop, and at that moment, I started to panic. The guy was just standing a few meters from the store, waiting for me. I should have ran back into the store and called my parents to come pick me up. Instead, stupid 14-year-old me hoped that there was a logical explanation for this guy's behavior, and that he might just have been waiting for someone else. So I got out the store and walked in the opposite direction of where the guy was. I walked faster, hoping that if he was following me, I would lose him amongst all the other shoppers. But when I turned right at the next corner, I looked back down the street again. He was still just a few meters behind me. While I walked even faster, I felt like I was about to cry, but I knew I had to keep calm, so I turned right again, and when I looked back and I still could see him behind me, I was positive that he was following me. What other reason would he have to walk around a block without entering any of the stores? While I tried to think about my way to escape, I suddenly saw a chance. The street light on the crossing just a few meters in front of me turned red, and I started running as fast as I could. I managed to make it just barely to the other side before the lane was packed with traffic. When I looked back, the guy hadn't made it across the street, and was just standing on the other side, waiting for the light to turn green again. He was still staring at me, but this time with a creepy, wide grin. At that moment I felt so scared as I had never felt before in my life, and I started running again, this time into a big department store just a few meters away from me. I knew that that department store had another entrance at the back facing another street. On that street, there was usually a line of cabs waiting to pick up shoppers. I sprinted through the store and out the other entrance. To my greatest relief, there was the usual line of cabs. I practically jumped into the first cab. In tears, I told the cab driver my home address, and then shouted, "Quick! Quick! Quick!" while frantically looking back to the door, expecting the guy to come out any second. Fortunately, I didn't see him. I'm still thankful that the cab driver instantly started driving and only asked what happened and if I was alright when we were a few blocks away. In tears and completely shaken, I told him about the guy that was following me, and how scared I was. And when we arrived at my parents' house, he refused to charge me, and waited until I was safely inside. To this day, I am still grateful to that cab driver. I don't know if that guy who was following me was just playing a very cruel prank on me and just wanted to scare me, or if he had something way more sinister in mind. I apologize for any errors. English isn't my first language, and just for the reference, I'm a relatively tall female, am very pale, and have very light blonde hair. I basically look like an albino save for my green eyes, which isn't horribly uncommon for a Nordic country. But, anyways, years ago, when I was 15, I was traveling by myself for the first time, visiting my aunt who had recently moved to Honolulu. She moved there for some job that ended up not working out for her. Nothing actually happened when I visited her for a month. It was the flight home when things ended badly. I sat on a window seat, which even now, after this, I still hate sitting in the window seat. The man who had the aisle seat seemed normal. At first. He was a nondescript looking man. Typical white, brown hair, brown eyes guy. He actually seemed rather pleasant at first. But I guess that's how it always happens. He immediately held out his hand to me and introduced himself as Rick. When I reached out to shake his hand, he grabbed my hand and kissed it. Now, at first, this didn't seem very strange. Americans were usually much more touchy-feely with strangers than they were in my country. But then he practically licked my hand and didn't give it back for several seconds. This is what I believe we'd call a red flag. We made small chat, and by small chat, I mean very small chat. My English was horrible, or rather, I wasn't very confident in my speaking abilities. As in, I doubt I could have ordered pizza that had toppings beside cheese. But understanding? Oh, I could understand a lot. When I started talking, this man's eyes grew very large, and he seemed very excited by my poor English. It wasn't the kind of, oh, I've just met a person from a different country, excited. It was a predatory excited, and it sent shivers down my spine. From our talk, he was 43, and when I informed him of my age, 15 at the time, he seemed even more giddy and creepy, and I most certainly realized that. I elected to ignore him throughout the flight, which, unfortunately for me, was 9.5 hours. Unfortunately, I did not have my headphones with me, and so I just tried to ignore him. It was difficult because every few minutes he would shake me and ask if I was still awake. When I attempted to go and use the bathroom, he wouldn't let me leave my seat, saying that it wasn't safe for a pretty thing like me. On that note, he kept trying to convince me that my passport would be safer with him. As it happens, I refused. After several hours, I finally drifted off, but I was stunned awake when I felt him rubbing my thigh. He defended himself, saying that he was checking my temperature. I know that I really should have spoken up, but I was so embarrassed by my English, and I didn't want to cause a scene. Luckily, I had enough sense to slap away his hand. I then drifted off again, only to be awoken a second time by a ruffling sound, which was him going through my bag. Again, I didn't make a fuss, but ripped my bag from his hands and held it tightly until the end of the flight. Nothing else happened because I vowed to myself not to sleep, and I stayed vigilant. When it came time to depart from the plane, he again wouldn't let me out to get my second bag from the overhead bin. But by this time, I was having none of it. I was tired, hungry, and I really had to use the bathroom. So I shoved and pushed past him, which he wasn't expecting, and grabbed my bag and left the plane. But did it end there? No, of course not. When I hurriedly left the plane, he ran after me and asked if he could give me a lift anywhere. We had landed in JFK, where I luckily had a few-hour layover. I said no, because I had a layover. He kept insisting that he could show me around the city, and that he would have me back in plenty of time for my flight. Now, at this point, I was both furious and horrified. I knew that this behavior was not normal for anyone, but I was also too afraid to ask for help. So I turned away and sprinted for the bathrooms, and assumed he wouldn't follow me in. I was right, but when I left, he was still outside, waiting for me. He kept telling me that New York City was beautiful, and I shouldn't miss it. He grabbed my arm and tried to lead me away. I think he assumed that I, being a foreign girl new to the city, wouldn't pass up such an opportunity. He told me he had a car waiting for us. Now, next I did something I'm still very proud of. I yelled, "Let me go!" Some people looked over, and one man actually got up. He was very large and scary looking. He came over and put his hand on the creepy man's shoulder and asked me, "Is he bothering you, miss?" I just nodded my head, and Rick made a beeline for somewhere that wasn't in the presence of this very scary man. My flights and layovers went without any further problems from then on out. Here's a little background before I get into the details. I spend every other weekend about 3 hours away from my hometown to where my boyfriend lives in Houston. When you drive from the San Marcos area to Houston, you go on Highway 10 for the duration of the trip. Just one lengthy highway that will eventually turn into Katy. The highway on its own is creepy. It's surrounded by dim lighting and farmland, with the occasional small countryside town peeking up every so often to keep you more awake. Usually I take this drive during the daytime, but due to the holidays, I decided to leave in the evening. Story time. I had been spending Thanksgiving with a bunch of friends, losing track of time. Soon it got dark, and I knew I had to go home. I was already a little nervous from the sheer lack of light and that 3-hour drive, but it had to be done regardless. I had work in the morning. I got into my little car, filled up, and started that long journey. I blared some loud music with heavy bass, and the rattling was entertainment enough that the drive didn't seem all that bad. I was halfway down this long stretch of road, only an hour left, when I noticed someone with their brights on and blaring coming right up behind me. I move over to the only other lane I can. This car was obviously in a hurry, and I wasn't in the mood to keep him from his destination any longer. The normal person would take this chance and just speed along past me, but this car moved into my lane. I was confused, but I had cruise control set, so I tried to ignore the blinding lights in my mirrors and kept going. Every so often, I would dare to peek up, and this driver would still be behind me. They were awfully, uncomfortably close. That level of close where the rebel in you just wants to start pumping your brakes and see if they back off. That close where the bumper sticker that goes, "If you are going to ride my ass, at least buy me dinner first," came from. Eventually, I tested it and started tapping in my brakes. Just as I had hoped, the car added some distance. I was thinking this little road game was over, so I continued on my way. I mean, where else was I supposed to go but forward? It was Sunday after Thanksgiving, so the roads were pretty much empty. It was easy to become acquainted with your road neighbors, and I could just tell this driver was not exiting. Cars would come and go, but an hour passes and they're still behind me. No biggie, I would think to myself. Soon I had to exit and make my way off the road and through Lulling, one of the smallest towns I've ever seen, and not a normal destination. Surely they will keep going on the highway. They didn't. I took that dark exit, and my new friend followed me. Thinking it was odd, I had my voice recognition text my boyfriend. It was more in light humor, and in an attempt to not worry. Reassuring me, I got a message back that it wouldn't be a big deal. I sighed and kept driving, reminding myself that they're just going somewhere and will turn off soon. Though, as I turned far away from the main road and onto a farm road that would take me home, I had my follower close behind me. By now, the brights were still on and seemed even brighter. The car was inching closer and closer until they were at the uncomfortable distance, and the lights were filling my mirrors. If that wasn't bad enough, they now had a horrible habit of turning those lights back to dim, then bright again, flashing as if trying to flag me down. There is no way I am stopping right now. No thank you. At this point, my heart is racing. I've seen too many episodes of CSI and the like to keep calm. I've been driving for well over an hour. There was no way someone in this huge world would have the exact same destination as me. My town was a small college town, and the odds of someone at the same time with the same destination as me were slim to none. Granted, maybe I was overreacting a bit. Either way, I cannot lie and say that I was nearly in a panic behind the steering wheel. I kept driving forward, my eyes almost glued to the rearview mirror that keeps my new friend in view, hoping soon I'd see those blinding lights turn off at each driveway I pass. The front of that car so close that if I try to stop, I fear it would turn into a car accident. Soon, I come across my little town. While it's usually a welcoming sight after a long drive, I'm stumped at what to do. There's some crazy stranger that has been tailing me with no end in sight. I've seen these shows. I'm not supposed to just lead some crazy person to my house in the middle of the night. I don't know anyone else or where to go, so I turn off quickly onto another back road, behind our neighborhood mess of a Walmart. I keep going until my apartment is well in view. I pass the first entrance, my follower continuing to keep up with me. Soon, I'm just desperate to get home, and all my logic goes out the window. I come up to the second entrance and turn, my heart ready to jump out of my chest and escape if this car follows me. It didn't. In that moment, I turn up my driveway, and I can almost feel the relief my eyes gave as the blinding lights disappear off into the dark road. I park as close as I can to my apartment, leaving all of my belongings except my keys and my phone. I ran up 3 flights of stairs faster than I've ever ran before, and only felt safe once I was behind the locked door. Hey guys, Blue Spooky here once again. I just wanted to thank you all very much for watching this video, especially if you've made it this far in. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm always open to constructive criticism. And if you have any stories you want me to read, or any stories of your own, please go ahead and send them to bluespookyreadings@gmail.com or my Facebook and Twitter accounts, which can be found in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.